McCarthy Insurance Group, serving the community for over 70 years. For home, farm, motor, life, health and business insurance, log on to mig.ie or free phone 1800 50 11 11. Probably your best call in 2024. Charles McCarthy Insurance is trading as McCarthy Insurance Group, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's classic hits radio.
Right, we are continuing our Work Smart Speak Out campaign against bullying. Bullying in the workplace. We'll be doing this all this week, and we've some fantastic guests lined up. And last night we heard from Stephanie Regan, clinical psychotherapist, and Michelle O'Nan, employment law solicitor. And the reaction was huge, the amount of people that come on with their own stories as well. We just didn't have time to get through everybody. This all started, of course, with a survey that we did some weeks ago, where we wanted to find out, how you were doing when you went back to work after COVID, if you were juggling life well, your work-life balance, etc., etc. What we didn't expect was to find the amount of people who said they were experiencing bullying in the workplace or harassment in the workplace. And that really impacted us here, so we wanted to do something about it. We don't like to think that people are feeling anxious or unsafe at work. And all this week we'll be hearing your stories and speaking with experts about this extremely important topic. And I'm delighted tonight to introduce Mary Cullen, founder of Insight HR, and also Aoife Ryan, who's a relationship mentor. And they both join me this evening. Good evening to you ladies. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Hi, Niall.
Hi, how are you, Niall?
You're all very welcome here. Now, I wanted to go first of all, if I can, just to Aoife, because last night, Aoife, I was talking to Stephanie about an individual case that I remembered of a guy who was a forklift driver. And he said the bullying had got so bad that he had tried to take his own life because he was in a very dark, deep place. But because he was a sole earner in the house during the downturn in the economy where he couldn't get another job, he felt he had to keep that job and go in every day. And it was one individual was making his life really difficult. But not only was that individual and that relationship, that individual really bad, when he got home, he was so depressed that, if I remember rightly, he had turned to alcohol. He wasn't sleeping properly. He was anxious. He was taking it out on his family, something he regrets terribly to this day because he's now in a better place and a new job, etc., etc. But I suppose in relation to relationships, which is just your kind of speciality in this department, I mean, it can affect your own personal relationship as well, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. I don't see how it couldn't affect your personal relationships and kind of seep into all aspects of your life. When you're going through something that significant in work and you spend so many hours in work every day, how could it not seep into your personal relationships then as well? It's very, very challenging. And that poor man, he found a way of coping with it. It perhaps wasn't ideal, but it was what he needed to do at the time to manage. I hear you say that he kind of really regretted it since, but he did his best at the time, and I'm sure his family understand that as well.
Oh, he said his wife was his rock, and he said that she put up with an awful lot while he went through that very dark place. But getting back to that, I suppose, the bullying aspect of it as well, and that was a manager or a kind of foreman that was making his life miserable by constantly picking on him all the time. That relationship between a boss and an employee is a difficult relationship. And I mentioned last night, we were talking about the fact that, my mother used to always say, give a man a yellow coat and he wants to be God. That was a kind of an old saying. And sometimes power, some people deal with power better than others, don't they? And that relationship between the employee can change drastically when one is given a senior position. So some people can be quite narcissistic about that and use that against you. But is it difficult to control that personality of being in charge?
I think it's oftentimes people find themselves in leadership or managerial roles without perhaps the training that they might need to be in that role. I often talk about conscious leadership, and conscious leadership is about leaders being in a position where they know themselves, they know their story, they speak their truth. They aren't afraid to put boundaries in and hold people accountable. And I think, that's kind of really reflective of somebody who is in a leadership position who will not let the power or use the power in a way that isn't going to be helpful. Yeah.
And does age make a difference to that dynamic if one is quite older than the other, or does gender make a difference to that dynamic, a man versus a woman or vice versa? Can they make differences in those relationships?
It can make a difference. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will. I think, age or title is no measure of consciousness or maturity. But I think really coming from a place, a reflective place, you'll find that most good leaders and conscious leaders are people who reflect personally and professionally. They look at themselves, they reflect on what's going on for them. They know themselves very, very well. They know their story. They've great self-awareness, I suppose, is what I'm saying. Whereas people who are less self-aware and don't reassess themselves and their behaviour constantly are more likely to then project behaviours onto others.
And Mary, just to come to you, you've got 20 years experience in the Department of HR, so I suppose you're the first port of call when something gets reasonably serious or something goes wrong. Do many companies, I know they're supposed to have a HR department, but how do we fare off, generally speaking, when we look across the country at particularly small businesses when it comes to HR? Do they all have HR departments, and should they all have a HR department? And what's the role of the HR department?
Yeah, I mean, a small business is going to struggle to afford a dedicated HR function. So lots of smaller businesses outsource that to consultants who look after elements of their compliance. But what they do day to day in terms of how they manage people is an entirely different story. So they might have in place a policy and procedure for something like bullying, but the behaviours that occur in the workplace are different things. When you look at a HR department, they're supporting management, but also supporting the workforce as well. And their role is to ensure that there's a safe place of work. And that the policies and procedures that need to be in place are there, and that if there's a problem, that it's proactively addressed. But that doesn't always happen, Niall, unfortunately.
Are they meant to be impartial, or because they're being paid for by the company, are they on the company side?
I wouldn't say so, but, I think there's different power dynamics in organisations that sometimes make it very difficult for an in-house HR person to be impartial. Most HR people that I know are genuinely interested in doing the right thing. But that doesn't always transpire. So I can't speak for everyone out there.
I spoke to somebody recently who had a hard time, was having a difficult time in work with a manager. And they went to the CEO of the company and said, he said, then you have to go and talk to HR. And he said, who's that? And the HR turned out to be the manager that he was having the problem with. So that can be quite a difficult situation. And when you have a problem, normally when you go to HR, I suppose the usual procedure is you're probably called for a meeting. Is it advisable to bring a witness to that meeting? Are you allowed to record that meeting, for example, during that period of time? Is that a facility that you're allowed to use?
Yeah, so the first step normally is that you speak to somebody about a concern, and there's the idea of contact support people who aren't in HR, who are trained by the organisation, and often they're the first people that somebody will go and speak to. But when you come to speak to HR, I mean, HR aren't your enemy. If you wish to have a witness, then you talk to HR about having a witness present with you. You can't record covertly that meeting yourself, because you're probably going to get into trouble for doing that. So I wouldn't advise that. If you're going to record something, if you want to record something, you need to say it.
Yeah, seek permission.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right,
and
so-
HR will usually record any conversation they have with you anyway and take notes and send them to you and keep it all official.
Because a lot of people kind of get flustered when they're in a HR meeting or they're in an important meeting like that, and then afterwards they go, "Oh, what was said? What was said? I can't even remember what was asked." So they kind of like to have some sort of notes or some sort of, I suppose, detailed, track of what actually went on at the time.
Yeah.
And when they're trying to resolve these issues, I mean, let's say, for example, it is bullying between two individuals. I mean, there only is one course of action generally in that, which is the other person is called into the room and told them to leave you alone. But the relationship is already damaged, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's difficult, you know what I mean?
I think it is. We do a lot of workplace investigations into bullying, and I don't really think there's any winners when it gets that far. There are informal mechanisms, so usually HR are going to tell you in the first place to try and approach the person directly yourself, speak to the person and see if that will change things. But in my experience, most people are afraid to do that, and particularly if there's a power difference. So if it's a manager who's bullying their subordinate, it takes a lot for that person to be brave enough to speak up, and you really need a speak up culture for someone to have the confidence to do that. So that's often unlikely, but HR will be trying to resolve things informally through mediation or a facilitated meeting or some other informal way, but that's by agreement with the employee. If that doesn't work, then you're into a workplace investigation, and that's a pretty difficult process for everyone involved, for all parties.
What are the kind of the typical ones that you would see, Mary? I mean, what are the kind of typical problems in the workplace? Is it, I don't know, is it to do with gender, for example? Is it sexual discrimination? Is it discrimination against pregnant women, which we spoke about last night, which one of our legal team last night were telling us was extremely common when it comes to the labour court? Or is it generally just that power dynamic where somebody believes they have this kind of superiority complex over somebody else?
It can be all of them. It can be all of them. I mean, I've seen some real horror stories throughout my days, and particularly because we investigate, we see the worst of human behaviour. So if you imagine what you see out there in the playground, the behaviours are similar in the workplace. So I've seen mobbing in the workplace. I've seen individuals targeted because maybe they're pregnant, or there's discrimination because somebody's different in some way, or it can be simply that power dynamic too. So it really varies case by case, individual by individual. What I have seen, Niall, that always surprises me is that people who are accused of bullying and maybe later found to have bullied someone rarely see themselves as that. They rarely believe themselves to be bullies.
And I was going to actually ask Jane about that, the type of person who is a bully, that's somebody with that kind of superiority complex. Aoife, is that the same person that would be dominant in a relationship as well, in a personal relationship? Somebody who would, I mentioned narcissistic behaviour earlier on, or somebody that would be maybe not so much violent in a relationship, but certainly quite controlling or coercive in a relationship. Is it the same type of person that probably in the workplace would carry that through and would be a similar type of person?
Yeah, it can be. Again, I think it each case is so individual. I guess there's kind of different types of bullying, and there's the kind of overt, aggressive, kind of dominant type, and then there's the more covert and less obvious, isolating people, ignoring people, kind of the subtle microaggressions that can happen. And, sometimes people mightn't even realise that they're doing it. So I think, as Mary said, oftentimes, the bully themselves has a story, has an experience, has a life that they're bringing into it, and oftentimes the bully needs to be held as much as the person who's being bullied needs to be held, and given space to really kind of see.
We don't
what's going
tend to
on
have
for
that
them.
same empathy for the bully, do we?
No, we don't.
No.
We don't. But
No.
everybody has a story. And I think, if we can bear that in mind, it can be helpful.
So are we saying that even when it comes to schoolyard bullying, for example, those individuals, that young guy or young girl, they have problematic backgrounds, that maybe they're being bullied at home by their own mother and father, or and that's just their kind of way out or way of letting it all out? I mean, is that normally what happens? They talk about that kind of situation where somebody is being abused in the home and hence goes out to be an abuser.
Yeah, again, it doesn't always happen, but I think that one thing that I've learned through my training and my work is that all behaviour makes sense, and that there's meaning and purpose in it. And if we can look beneath the behaviour, we can usually see what's really going on and kind of come to the core of the issue. And you see that in the playground, definitely. Yeah.
And in relationships between work colleagues, there was actually a clip I played last night. I'm going to just play it again. It's a little bit lighthearted, some people believe, but it's actually quite serious when you listen to it. Now, this is an actual situation that one of our texters texted in, but we got actors to play the role because obviously people don't want their voices identified. Have a quick listen to this. We played it last night. It's interesting.
Congratulations, Lily. Who did you have to sleep with to get this promotion?
Yeah, okay.
I mean it. What's your secret? You aren't here a wet week.
Yeah. Are you related to someone?
Maybe I'm just good at my job.
You are funny.
I suppose it doesn't hurt that Robert fancies the arse off you. Will you give him the ride now that you're working directly under him?
Okay, I have to go.
Don't be such a dry shite. You know we're messing.
Yeah, come on. It's a laugh.
Yeah, I know. It's just not funny. I worked really hard to get this promotion.
Oh, I'm sure you did many extra jobs for this one.
I mean, just to come to you, Mary, that's what you were talking about, the mobbing earlier on, isn't it? That's when a group of people come together. And I'm going to come back to Aoife about those relationships or those dynamics between people. That I don't know whether it's true, whether women can be more difficult with women and men can be more difficult with men, or is it normally men against women? I mean, from your experience, that kind of ganging up on people, is that primarily the opposite sex or the same sex do that?
It can be mixed. And in my experience, it often is mixed because it's a group of friends or a group who have come together in some way in the workplace, formed a relationship and a bond, and then exclude or intimidate or are hostile towards another person or maybe other people. And, obviously in the context of bullying, it can be far more difficult when there's more than one person involved in targeting you. And for those people, they really do suffer. I've seen women losing their hair. They're so distressed.
Yeah.
People not able to sleep, to eat, relationship problems like you described earlier, addiction issues. It can be really, really challenging for people. But mobbing is probably one of the most disturbing things that I have seen out there. And it can happen anywhere, in any environment, irrespective of, age, gender, position in a company. It can be really
jealousy
toxic.
Has a lot to do with mobbing too, doesn't it? If you've
I
got,
think so.
say, a good-looking girl in the office, and I remember years ago a psychologist telling me that I remember they were talking about my daughter at the time, and she had some learning difficulties. And this clinical psychologist actually turned around to me and said, "Oh, well, look, unfortunately, she may always have these learning difficulties, but she's an attractive young girl, so she'll do well in life." And I thought that was a very odd thing for him to say. But I remember then looking up research on it, and there was research to say that more attractive people do better in life. And I think there's when you see, a good-looking girl coming into the office, other girls, or indeed guys, can, have a go because, maybe there's an element of jealousy. Does jealousy play a role in bullying as well?
I think it's really complex, Niall. I suppose from our perspective in HR, we're kind of looking at the behaviours and not going behind to understand the why. We're looking at the facts. Did you do something? Did you isolate someone? Did you exclude someone? Did you gossip about someone? Did you make mean remarks to them? And what makes bullying is repeated inappropriate behaviour, not just a single incident. So when somebody claims that they're being bullied, it's about that repeated approach from someone, and it could be a whole combination of things. Jealousy could play a part, but it's not always about jealousy. It's not always because someone's attractive or good at their job. It can be for any reason whatsoever. Someone has, looked at you and decided you're too successful, or you're not successful at all. You're too good looking, or maybe you're not good looking at all. So, the logic behind it, I often don't understand myself.
Well, let me just get to Aoife on that relationship and that clip where obviously you've got a girl who is popular with the bosses, or, maybe she's just good at her job and she's just popular with the bosses because she's good at her job. And you've got this group of girls, that relationship, between groups of people within the office, because everybody has their kind of, their friend, that their go-to people that they go to, and then other people can feel excluded. And in this situation, obviously, that girl is being excluded and being picked on. I mean, that dynamic happens quite a lot, particularly in a smaller office, I imagine.
Yeah, and I think it's really challenging. As Mary said, it's very complex. But I think that the culture of the organisation comes in, whether it's a large organisation or a small organisation. Do people condone nasty behaviour? Do management, do the leaders in the organisation condone this kind of behaviour? Does behaviour, inappropriate behaviour, is it just let go? And I think that's where the kind of the leadership really comes into play, because and it's also where allyship comes in. That if you see behaviour that is not appropriate, do you stand by? Do you say nothing? Do you join in with the behaviour, or do you speak up? Do you speak your truth around it and say, actually, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable with the way this person is being treated.
Most people don't, do they, Eva? They don't speak up because they don't want to get involved, or they feel, I don't want to say anything to the boss about the way Mary's being treated by John and Paddy or something, because, I'll be seen as the troublemaker if I get involved or if I say something to the boss. Yeah. So they maybe, would it be best if you see that type of behaviour, and if you see Mary being picked on by Jane and whoever else, do you go to Mary and say, listen, Mary, you shouldn't accept that from those people, blah, 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 blah? Or do you go to your boss and say, I don't like what I'm seeing here?
Yeah, or do you stand up and say, actually, this is making me really uncomfortable? So you're not talking about Mary, you're not talking about the boss, but you're saying, actually, I'm really uncomfortable with this. And I'm, in the moment, I don't like this. So you're talking about yourself. And then, you can go and support Mary and see what she might need. And, if it's possible, because it's not always possible to go to the boss. Fear comes in a lot for people, I think, as well. And again, depending on the culture of the organisation, what is it safe to do and what is it not safe to do?
I mean, what should that girl have done in that situation? Is there any kind of examples of sentences that we can use to object to that kind of behaviour between two people in that relationship? Because I suppose it's like any relationship between a husband and a wife, or girlfriend and boyfriend, that when something steps over the line, you react in a certain way or say a certain thing. I mean, what should she have done in that relationship? She walked away, obviously.
I think she responded pretty well. Yeah, she put in a boundary for herself there, and she said, actually, this isn't okay for me. I'm removing myself from it. She didn't engage with the drama. She kind of said her piece and she left it with them. What could have possibly made it worse is if she engaged in the drama and they got into a back and a forth, and that can kind of then escalate. But what she did was she just said, actually, no, this is what I did. I'm good at my job. This is who I am, and now I'm taking myself away from it. And I think that's probably a pretty good way of handling it.
Just to go back to just Mary, by the way, for the people who know, Mary Cullen is the founder of Insight HR, and she's over 20 years' experience, going through a wide range of sectors in the area of employment. But I mean, employment law would have to come into all this as well, Mary. And if you don't get your resolve from HR, or you've exhausted HR, And a lot of people find themselves in a situation of constructive dismissal where they feel they have no option but to go. And that happened on 2 occasions last night with 2 of the callers we spoke to. They left the job. What recourse do they have then? I suppose it's to the Labour Court then, isn't it?
Yeah, so they can, make a complaint to the WRC for a constructive dismissal. But I would say that it's a very high bar to prove that you've been constructively dismissed. So the organisation will have had to entirely ignore you and not offered ways of resolving your problem. So typically, if you have a complaint, you maybe make it verbally to a manager or speak to a contact support person. They will help you, I suppose, decide on a course of action that you're comfortable with. And then if all things fail, they're obliged by law to investigate the matter. And it's actually a health and safety issue. So the Code of Practice for the Prevention and Resolution of Bullying has been jointly written by the WRC and the Health and Safety Authority, and is guidance there for employers on how they're obliged to actually handle these situations. So for somebody to leave the job without going through the procedures themselves, they're likely to lose that case in the WRC. And, to prove constructive dismissal, they would really have had no interaction from the company.
I'll give you an example. There was a girl on last night and she said the company's answer or solution to the problem she had with another individual was to isolate her. In other words, they put her on the 3rd floor in an office on her own and weren't even giving her any work. It was just a case of having her there and not firing her because obviously she was seen, as she felt, as a troublemaker. So they just put her out on her own. So in other words, she was the one that was punished and not the bully. In those kind of situations, is that enough to prove that it's being badly dealt with?
It depends on the circumstances, but I mean, if you're treating somebody badly and continuing to treat somebody badly by giving them no work, by sending them into Coventry in a sense, then I think somebody could have a case. But it would really depend on what else. Usually, from a HR perspective, you're trying to engage with the employee to come up with solutions with them and to keep them safe. So, from a HR point of view, I couldn't approve of someone being sent off into an office and given no work. That isn't right. But the circumstances and the devil is always in the detail when you get to the WRC. Remember, in the WRC, you give evidence under oath. You're cross-examined potentially by solicitors or barristers on the other side or trade union reps. And so it's not an easy route for an employee either. So it's something that I would urge caution about resigning from your job and assuming that somebody, a third-party forum, is going to necessarily agree with you.
By the way, it was interesting during the break, myself and Jane were just talking there, Aoife, about what you said, and some people have texted in with a lack of empathy for bullies. But I think you are right. If we don't have an understanding or a better understanding of why people do this or this type of behaviour, well, I suppose we'll never ever get to the end of it, will we?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand completely how people would have a lack of empathy, and especially if somebody has been, experienced bullying, it's difficult to, feel compassion for that person who's perhaps persecuting them. So I do understand that, but I guess. We're all human and humans are incredibly complex, and we all bring our story with us, and our experiences with us. So I think if we can find compassion for the bully, it can go a long way as well. But I understand it's not easy.
I mean, can anyone become a bully in the right circumstances? I suppose, given the power, maybe. Or is it possible that anybody, your normal placid person, can suddenly become a bully?
I think it is, and because there's so many different types of bullying, it's not just the kind of aggressive, really,
There's the passive aggressive as well.
There's the passive aggressive. There's the kind of just the nasty comments. Even in that clip that you played earlier, people just kind of jeering and kind of laughing at somebody and then saying, oh, come on, we're just having a laugh. That can feel so incredibly uncomfortable and bad for an individual. But those ladies, maybe perhaps they just thought we're just having a laugh. So, I think potentially, unless we're really reflective and unless that we're really kind of self-aware, we can slip into behaviours that are perhaps less than kind at times.
Okay, let me just try if I think I have David back now. David, sorry, are you there?
How you know, how's things?
How you doing, David? Sorry about that, I do apologise.
Great, no problem.
David, what's your story?
I worked on the east side of Northside Shopping Centre. The east side, the big major retail shop.
Yeah.
In Curlock. And the management were terrible,
Mm.
And even to this day, I do see the demeanour of the staff, and they're lovely people. I know them all so well, and they're lovely, lovely people. I don't work there anymore, thank God.
Mm-hmm. And when you say management were terrible, what, just generally speaking, it just wasn't a nice place to work at the time?
Oh, it was a horrible, horrible thing, horrible the way they used to... the way they speak to staff, the hard-working staff,
Yeah, and it is, and I suppose that comes down to, in a lot of larger places where people work, staff can almost be disposable. So it doesn't really matter how you treat them because I'll just get somebody else to replace them. Mind you, probably not as easy nowadays to get people to be replaced because of the staff shortage. But did you see people leave because of that, David, including yourself?
Well, I left in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had a terrible nightmare when they kind of just explain something in a nutshell,
Yeah, whatever you do, don't mention the name of the shop, you won't, or the name of any individuals or anything like that. Okay.
Absolutely, not at all. And it's not in my demeanour. Mm. It was only a dream. I dreamt that I shot someone in the arm, in the other arm, in the leg. Manager,
Yeah.
So it didn't...
Because you despised him so much?
Because of the way it was being treated.
And what would give me an example of what, for obviously to hate somebody that much that you want to kill them, obviously they treated you very badly, but give me an example of what he did to you.
There was actually a woman.
A woman,
but,
okay.
Yeah, but the manager, they were in cahoots, and then HR were in cahoots, They all talked about, just say, David Smith, blah, 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 he's a little... And it wasn't. I was so vulnerable and so passive. Your colleague saying there on the phone there, they thought they could pick on me, Now, I'll tell you the truth.
Why do you think they thought they could pick on you because you were a little bit less, you were kind of a little bit soft, or you were vulnerable, or you wouldn't speak out?
I was soft.
Yeah.
It was called Space Baby. I left there in 2009, right? I got a redundancy package. I got 13 grand. It was gone within 4 months. Right? Paid off a few bills, right? Mentally happier. But, financially poor, which I was,
And did you get another job?
Pardon?
Did you get another job?
I did. I got another job. I did the CE scheme there about 8 years ago.
And are you happier now?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you can see the difference in a workplace where you're not being bullied and a workplace where you are being bullied. And I suppose, now, I just want to bring up something that you mentioned there to Mary. A lot of people are texting in, Mary, and there's one or two texts there in relation to HR, saying that HR were useless because they were on the boss's side. Now, I suppose it's different for you because obviously you're a third-party company. So, other companies will hire your company to do the HR, which seems like a more impartial situation. But when it's an in-house HR, they can be more on the company side, can't they? Or am I imagining that?
They can be compromised, I think, by the position they're in. And it depends on how much influence they have themselves within a company. In my experience, most HR people are decent people. But I have also seen over the years, bad behaviour from HR too. So it's really awful to hear that David would have that kind of experience in his workplace and that HR did nothing to help or support. I see HR's role as being impartial everywhere they are, and that their role is to ensure that the company complies with the law. And if bullying is occurring, then the company is not complying with the law.
Generally speaking, do you think people have faith in HR departments?
No. And I think that's sad for the profession.
That's a short answer to not such a simple question. But stay there. Let me just go to Ross as well. Ross, hi. How are you?
Good evening, now. How are you going?
Good, Ross. You're a little bit muffled there, Ross. I don't know if you're on a speakerphone, but go ahead.
Can you hear me there now?
Yeah, I can hear you much better now. Go ahead.
Okay, that's good, yeah. I had a similar situation. Going back a good few years now. I finished school. I was only a young fella, but I started driving tractors straight after school. Now, it was great money at the time, but I needed more, so I worked in a nightclub, say, on the weekends, a bar and a nightclub for cash. But long story short, I started seeing this girl at the time. Now, I'm going back to 2003, 2004. Started seeing this girl at the time, and what I didn't know, or I completely oblivious to it, was that one of the duty managers in the nightclub had a ridiculous psycho infatuation with my girlfriend, which I didn't know. And my God, he made my life absolutely hell. And it was only when I said it to her, I said, he's giving me wicked jip, like a proper...
And what he was giving you difficult tasks to do and making...
Just not difficult tasks, just fucking me out in front of people.
Watch your language there, okay, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, just in front of people, always, putting me down and, just...
Humiliating you.
It was pretty much, yeah. Now, like I said, I was there. I wasn't desperately need the money, but it was handy work, and it was good money with tips and all. It was good money. A top up, say, all right, because I was renting at the time.
Yeah, and it was cash. You were getting cash in your hands. That was handy. But when you were being humiliated in front of him like that, and was he older than you, by the way, this guy?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. He was 5 or 6 years older than me. But the thing is, he was friends with the manager, and that's how we got in there. Now, the manager, in fairness to him, was bang on. But we very rarely saw
him. And
him.
how did that make you feel then when you were being humiliated all the time like that? That must have been difficult.
Oh, I wanted to throttle him. But I couldn't make sense of it. It was only when I actually spoke to the girl that I was going out with at the time
that you realised that he had an eye for her. Yeah.
No, but she said he stalked me for a couple of years when we were in school together. And I was like, what? She said, yeah, he stalked me. And she said he was a loser in school. And one day he confessed his undying love for me. And she said, that's why he's giving you hassle, because he's jealous.
Because he's jealous. Yeah, he's jealous.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting one. Sorry, Ross, I know I'm going to everybody very quick, but Aoife, relationships in the workplace, it can be a huge problem. I always advise people to never get involved in relationships in the workplace. I know that's not what Ross did. He was going out with this girl and your man just happened to have an eye for her who happens to be over Ross. But relationships in a workplace, for example, a girl fancying the boss or or a guy fancying the female boss or whatever it happens to be, that's a recipe for disaster generally within the workplace. Relationships within a workplace, I imagine, is it?
It can be very tricky, yeah. And, I think often there would be HR policies in place, I think, to kind of, that would look at that. But, I think there's a balance as well. I met my husband in work, so if that had been kind of outlawed, we wouldn't have ended up together. So I think it's there's a balance always in things. But yeah, if there's a power difference, it can certainly be very difficult.
Yeah, because some companies, I know this, Mary, and maybe you'd be more familiar with this, the rule handbooks. Some companies do ban relationships, from what I've heard. Now, I don't know how you can stop relationships in the workplace, but some companies, is there companies that ban relationships within the workplace?
I think it's really tricky, to be honest. I mean, how can you tell two adults that they can't be in a relationship? Generally, what a company will ask is maybe that you declare the relationship so that, there isn't favoritism or anything like that. But I mean, people, if they're attracted to each other, they like each other, they're going to find a way to see each other, whether it's in the workplace or outside the workplace. And some of the most bitter disputes that we ever see are relationships gone wrong in the workplace, where maybe somebody moves on and starts dating someone else in the workplace, and you have an angry, bitter person left behind. Those situations can get really, really messy.
Yeah, because they have to work together.
Yeah.
Or one works for the other one, maybe when that was a more senior position. But stay there for a second. Let me go to Chris. Chris, hi. Chris, how are you?
Yeah, because that's work together.
Chris, okay, we need to get Chris to lower down his radio. Let me just go to Ava. Ava, hi, how are you?
Hi, Niall, how are you?
Good, Ava. It says on my screen you were at a meeting today in work and you're really angry. Why are you really angry?
Yeah, I'm really angry. That's why I wanted a bit of advice off that lady there. Is her name Mary, is it?
It is, the HR lady, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, does she have any advice for me? Because this woman is actually gaslighting me. I'm just a regular worker and she's the manager. And she makes it out like, oh, you're great, you're brilliant and whatever. When I bring it to her and I tell her kind of my issue, I don't go to HR or anything about it. I go directly to her. But now she put me in now today and kind of making me sign a bit of paperwork and stuff. And I didn't sign nothing because...
and what was she asking? And what was she asking you to sign? Did you know what it was?
No, I don't actually. And the bullet points in it was all kind of her views and like her views against me. But that wasn't what took place in the meeting.
Oh, okay.
She's kind of putting her...
And what was she? Is she giving you a hard time in work, Ava?
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She's basically, and then she turned it around and be like, "Oh no, I didn't say that." She's dangerous. Like, I don't know what I'm dealing with here, Niall. Now, to be honest with you.
Okay, so when you say you had a meeting with her, did she call the meeting with you, or did HR call the meeting?
Yeah, and it was for the moment. No, she kind of caught me off guard and just pulled me in, and like that, I should have been notified, or I should have had some third party or something, Okay,
I'm short of time, but you've raised two really good issues there, Ava, and I'm going to put both of them to Mary. First of all, Mary, can a boss demand you go in for a meeting in the office, if there's been an ongoing issue or an issue? I mean, do they have to give you prior warning? Can you bring a third party with you? In other words, short notice meeting here, quick, come into my office right now, Ava. Is that acceptable?
It depends on the circumstances. And again, I'm sorry to hear that, Ava. It sounds like a horrible thing to happen. But yes, your manager can call you into a meeting and talk to you informally about anything that they wish to speak to you about. However, if you're concerned that you're being bullied by your manager, then you can choose to raise the issue with her. But if she's not responding to you, if she's not changing her behaviour or doing something different, then you can take it up to the next level, whoever that next level is. So that could be the HR department, it could be to a more senior manager. And again, it's about you being very clear what is actually happening. I would encourage you to start taking notes around incidents, the dates, the times, the places, the people who were there. And then it's about going and speaking to somebody. But I would always encourage you to try and solve it rather than, get into formal procedures, because the formal procedure is difficult too.
The other thing there she mentioned as well, our manager asking her to sign something. Would you always advise people to never sign anything until you have somebody look at it first?
I think it should be, you should have the opportunity to take it home and review it. And if you disagree with the record that was taken, then I would respond in writing and correct that record with your version of events or what you believe to have happened. You don't have to sign something that you don't agree with. You can actually send in a letter or an email to say you don't agree with these notes. It isn't how you believe the meeting took place, and this is what you believe was said.
Does that
Yeah,
help?
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree with Mary. But here's the thing. This meeting shouldn't have even took place. I don't want this at all. You know, I just like a normal work environment. I don't want no hostile behaviour, none of that. I just go in and do my work and that's it. I don't want a horrible atmosphere in work. I don't like it at all. It just makes it very unpleasant for everyone involved now. And I just have to say that there's no need for it at all to escalate, because we left it at that a few weeks ago and it was grand. But it was like I came to her with my rights and I kind of know like a bit about the workplace and stuff, about what they can and can't do. And I think that's after a niner now, that she's after bringing me in now on her terms without notifying me, to try and get me to say something off there, to catch me out on something. And she has nothing on me, so she's just trying to make me life hell.
Okay, well, I think taking Mary's advice, you know, if you don't agree with whatever she asked you to sign, Mary has given very good advice there. Always put everything in writing, because at least then you have a record of it. So send, you know, an email to either the boss or indeed the person above that person to say, listen, I was called in for a meeting. I don't agree with the terms and conditions or what was written about me or I was asked to sign. And this is my version of what happened, you know, when we met 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I'm not signing anything on those grounds. And then just see what comes back to you. Ava, thank you very much indeed. Let me go to Chris very quickly before we go to the news. Chris, hi, how are you?
How are you now? 3 times you called me and I answered you, and you...
No, it was just that you had your radio on in the background, Chris, and we could hear the radio in the background.
For that, yeah.
Okay. What would you like? What would you like to say, Chris?
No, I maybe just as you know me by now. I'm 62, but maybe I'm old-fashioned here. But I remember when I was in tech. I won't say what tech it was. It was in Dublin, and there was a chap in my class who was picked on by everyone else except myself. Now, well, not everyone. But, for instance, when he came in one day, I don't know whether you remember, young lads wearing short trousers.
I do.
And this fella pulled down his trousers in the corridor. And we were in the Christian Brothers. And I remember standing up for him. I said to the other guy, I said, leave him alone. You're always picking on him. And, of course, when I defended him, the Christian Brothers picked it out of me. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And I know we discussed a lot of that when we were talking about bullying in school, and that was something that happened particularly a long time ago.
So when the fella's trousers were pulled down, I defended. I went towards the other fella, which I'm not a fighter. I said, leave him alone. The Christian brother came along and he says, Christy, stay back.
And
I don't got to do with it.
And you ended up being picked on.
And I said to him, listen, it was so-and-so that did it. No, come on now, you were saying.
I understand how tough that can be, and I'm sorry again for cutting everybody short tonight because I just don't have a huge amount of time. But I want to just go very quickly, if I can, to Aoife in relation to that idea in that relationship situation where you do stand up, and you mentioned earlier on that you should stand up always in those situations and say, I'm not comfortable with this or I'm unhappy with this. There is that problem then that you then get looked at as somebody who's a bit of a troublemaker, or that you then become the victim of, you know, in that dynamic earlier on with the Mean Girls, that you then become their victim because you defended somebody that they wanted to pick on.
Yeah. I mean, that is always a possibility, and I think it's a difficult one. I think what's really important is you trust how it feels for you. Does it feel safe for me to be an ally in this circumstance? Does it feel safe for me to stand up, or am I not able to do that? And trust that, because you'll always know yourself what is going to be okay for you. If I'm okay and I can do this, or if I can't. And I think you can only trust yourself in those situations.
And you also said, you know, you were talking about, you know, mentioned that good leaders are reflective. How do you become reflective?
I think it starts with kind of looking at how you speak to people, your behaviour, what you're doing. It's probably best to do it in the company of another initially, a professional who can guide you and accompany as you reflect on your life, why you do the things that you do and why you behave in the way that you behave.
Okay. Well, look, it's been very, very interesting talking to both of you, Aoife, Ryan and Mary Cullen. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. And hopefully some of the advice that both of you have given out in relation to relationships and obviously HR will help people like Ava, who were on earlier on as well, and many other people who are listening and we find with these kind of topics, people are afraid sometimes to come on because they don't want their voice to be recognised, even though we do change people's names, etc., but they don't want to be recognised, or maybe they're a bit embarrassed. People can be very embarrassed by being the victims of a bully because sometimes, they can feel a bit soft, if they're the victim of a bully and they feel a little bit embarrassed. By the way, just finally, Aoife, I don't want to ask you that because obviously that's about the relationship aspect of it. Is it embarrassing to be the victim of a bully for people? Is that why they tend not to want to come forward too much? Yeah, it can be. It can be like, why me? What is it about me? You can internalise it. What is it about me that they're picking on, or that they think that they can pick on me? So I think it's... am I soft? Yeah. Am I too soft? Is there something wrong with me? That people think that they can get away with it. But I think it's really important for people to know their value. Is this worthy of me? Is this okay for me? And if it's not, find a way to take some action. And it might be overt action, or it might be just for yourself, for you to know. But I think coming from that place of what's okay for me, what's worthy of me. The best advice I've ever got is from my wife, and she says to me, and I believe it kind of carries through to these kind of topics as well, which is always value yourself. Yeah. It's the most important person. Yeah, and know your value. Absolutely. Mary, listen, thank you very much indeed. And Aoife, thank you for joining us. Don't forget, we will do more of this again tomorrow night. We will talk to more panellists again tomorrow night in relation to this. And if you do have any stories, or you want to talk to us, or you're looking for advice, all you've got to do is WhatsApp 087 188 0008, or you can email us at niallboylan@classichits.ie.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's Classic Hits Radio.